Beyond the walls of King's Landing and Rhaenyra's grip on power, fighting continued throughout the Seven Kingdoms. Fair Castle fell to Dalton Greyjoy, and with it, Fair Isle and its last resistance to the Ironborn. The Red Kraken claimed 4 of Lord Farmer's daughters as salt wives, and gave the 5th to his brother. Farmer and his sons were ransomed back to Casterly Rock for their weights in silver. In the Reach, Lady Merryweather yielded Long Table to Aemond Hightower. True to his word, his lordship did not harm her or her family, though he did strip her castle of its wealth and every scrap of food, feeding his thousands with her grain as he broke camp and marched on to Bitterbridge. When Lady Caswell appeared on the ramparts of her castle to ask for the same term Lady Merryweather had received, Hightower let Prince Daeron give the answer. "You shall receive the same terms you gave my nephew, Maelor." Her ladyship could only watch as Bitterbridge was sacked and burnt. The Hogshead was the first building put to the torch. Inns, guild halls, storehouses, all were consumed by dragon flame. Even the sept was burned, with hundreds of wounded still within. Only the bridge remained untouched, as it was the only crossing of the Mander for leagues. The people of the town were put to the sword if they tried to fight or flee, or driven into the river to drown. A seemingly harsh punishment for Lady Caswell, considering in reality her handling of Maelor's death was seemingly just and fair given the circumstances. After watching her small folk burn, as she watched from her walls, Lady Caswell commanded her gates be thrown open. "No castle can be held against a dragon," she told her garrison. When Lord Hightower rode up, he found her standing atop the gatehouse with a noose around her neck. "Have mercy on my children, Lord," she begged, before throwing herself down to hang. Maybe perhaps that moved Lord Aemond, for her ladyship's young son and daughter was spared and sent in chains to Old Town. The men of the castle garrison received no mercy but the sword. In the Riverlands, Ser Criston Cole abandoned Harrenhal, striking south along the western shore of the God's Eye with 3,600 men. Behind him, death, disease and desertion had thinned their ranks. Prince Aemond had already departed, flying Vhagar. The castle stood empty no more than 3 days before Lady Sabotha Thray swooped down to seize it. Inside she found only Alice Rivers, the wet nurse and purported witch, who had warmed Prince Aemond's bed during his days at Harrenhal, and now claimed to be carrying his child. "I had the dragon's bastard in me," the woman said, as she stood naked in the godswoods, with one hand upon her swollen belly. "I can feel his fires licking at my womb." Nor was her babe the only fire kindled by Aemond Targaryen. No longer tied to the castle or host, the one-eyed prince was free to fly where he would. It was war as Aegon the Conqueror and his sisters had once waged, fought with dragonflame, as Vhagar descended from the autumn skies again and again to lay waste to the lands and villages and castles of the Riverlords. House Darry was the first to know the prince's wrath. The men bringing in the harvest burned or fled as the crops went up in flame, and Castle Darry was consumed by a firestorm. Lady Darry and her young children survived by taking shelter in the vaults under the keep, but her lord husband and his heir died on the battlements, together with 200 of his sworn swords and bowmen. 3 days later, it was Lord Harroway's town left smoking. Lordsmill, Blackbuke, Buckle, Claypool, Swineford, Spiderwood. Vhagar's fury fell upon each in turn, till half the Riverlands seemed ablaze. Ser Criston Cole faced fires as well. As he drove his men south through the Riverlands, smoke rose up before him and behind him. Every village he came to, he found burned and abandoned. His column moved through the forests of dead trees, where living woods had just been days before, as the Riverlords set blazes along all of his lines of march. In every brook and pool and village well he found death, dead horses, dead cows, dead men, swollen and stinking, befouling the waters. Elsewhere his scouts came across ghastly tables where armoured corpses sat beneath trees in rotting remnants, in a grotesque mockery of a feast. The feasters were the men who had fallen in the fish feed, skulls grinning under rusted helms as their green and rotted flesh fell from their bones. 4 days out of Harrenhal, the attacks began. Archers hid amongst the trees, picking off outriders and stragglers with their longbows. Men fell behind the rearguard and were never seen from again. Men fled, abandoning their shields and spears to fade into the woods. Men went over to the enemy. In every village, another ghastly feast was found. Familiar with such sights by now, Ser Criston's outriders grimaced and rode past, paying no heed to the rotting dead, until the corpses suddenly sprang up and fell upon them, and dozens died before they realised they had all been taken by a ploy. the work of a Mirish sellsword in the service of Lord Vance, a former mummer called Black Trombo. All this was but a prelude, for the Lords of the Trident had been gathering their forces. When Ser Criston left the lake behind, striking out overland for the Blackwater, he found them waiting atop a stony ridge, 300 mounted knights in armour, as many longbowmen, 3,000 archers, 3,000 ragged rivermen with spears, hundreds of Northmen brandishing axes, mauls, spiked maces, and ancient iron swords. Above their heads flew Queen Rhaenyra's banner. "Who are they?" a squire asked when the foe appeared, for they showed no arms but the Queen's. "Our death," answered Ser Criston Cole, for these foes were fresh, better fed, better horsed, better armed, and they held the high ground, whilst his own men, stumbling, sick, and dispirited. Calling for a peace banner, King Aegon's hand rode out to treat with them. 3 came down the ridge to meet him. Chief amongst them was Sir Geroge Grey, in his dented plate and mail. Pate of Longleath was with him, the Lion Slayer who had cut down Jason Lannister, together with Roddy the Ruin, bearing the scars he had taken at the fish feed. "If I strike my banners, do you promise us our lives?" Ser Criston asked the 3 of them. "I made my promise to the dead," Ser Geroge replied. "I told them I would build a sept for them out of traitors' bones. I don't have near enough bones yet," Ser Criston answered. "If there is to be a battle here, many of your own will die as well." The Northman, Roderick Dustin, laughed at the words, saying, "That's why we've come. Winter is here. Time for us to go. No better way to die than with a sword in hand." At this, Ser Criston drew his longsword from his scabbard. "As you will it. We can begin here, the 4 of us. 1 of me against the 3 of you. Will that be enough to make a fight of it?" But Longleaf the Lion Slayer said, "I'll want 3 more." And up on the ridge, Red Rob Rivers and 2 of his archers raised their longbows. 3 arrows flew across the field, striking Cole in the belly, neck, and breast. "I'll have no songs about how brave you died, Kingmaker," declared Longleaf. "There's tens of thousands of dead on your account." But by this point, he was speaking to a corpse. The battle that followed was one-sided as any in the Dance of Dragons. Lord Roderick raised a warhorn to his lips and sounded the charge, and the Queen's men came screaming down the ridge, led by the Winter Wolves on their shaggy northern horses, and the knights on their armoured desaries. With Ser Criston dead upon the ground, the men who had followed him from Harrenhal lost all heart. They broke and fled, casting aside their shields as they ran. Their foe came after, cutting them down by the hundreds. Afterwards, Ser Geroge was heard to say, "Today was butchery, not battle." It's reported, upon hearing this report, Mushroom dubbed the fight the Butcher's Ball, and so it has been known ever since.